Good evening, I'm Nima, and this is Forum Daily for Wednesday, June 1st. And tonight, the Bank of Canada makes a move long predicted by economists. It has raised its key interest rate by half a percentage point to 1.5%. And it's warning that the rates will need to go even higher to rein in inflation, which was running at 6.8% in April. The central bank says global pressures, including Russia's invasion of Ukraine, COVID-19 lockdowns in China, and backlogged supply chains are fueling higher prices for energy and food. And these rising interest rates continue to impact the housing market. A study by Chartered Professional Accountants of Canada finds half of Canadians who don't own a home think they'll never be able to buy one. 90% of respondents say rising interest rates are the greatest hurdle to getting into the housing market, and 84% say saving for a down payment is another significant challenge. Prospective buyers are expected to stay on the sidelines. In a move to tackle soaring inflation, the New Brunswick government has announced new funding to help low-income earners cover rising food and fuel bills. Premier Blaine Higgs says the emergency fuel and food benefit will provide a one-time payment of $225 for low-income individuals, or $450 for families. More than 75,000 people are eligible for the program, and the money will be distributed to those already receiving low-income or housing benefits. Some trouble is brewing for Tim's. Privacy watchdogs say the Tim Hortons mobile ordering app violated the law. This because users had their movements tracked and recorded every few minutes, even when their app was not open. Federal and provincial privacy commissioners launched investigations, and this was after a reporter obtained data showing that the app had tracked his location for more than 2,700 times in less than 5 months. The commissioners found the app misled many users to believe information would only be accessed when the app was in use. Moving to Toronto now, where public health has confirmed a second case of monkeypox and is investigating 6 other cases. Monkeypox is a rare disease that comes from the same family of viruses that causes smallpox, but officials say it doesn't spread easily between people. Earlier this week, the World Health Organization's top monkeypox expert said she was skeptical that the virus would spark a global pandemic. On the West Coast, the British Columbia government will soon join a handful of jurisdictions around the world that have decriminalized certain drugs. It would mean drug users aren't criminalized for possessing small amounts of some illicit drugs for personal use. Uruguay, Portugal, Mexico, Argentina, Colombia, Ecuador, and the state of Oregon have all introduced some form of decriminalization in an effort to curb overdose deaths. Portugal was the first European country to decriminalize all drugs in 2001. Canadian tick researchers say you can expect to see more of the tiny crawling bugs, which can carry Lyme disease, than ever before. Researcher Dr. Vet Lloyd from New Brunswick's Mount Allison University says it's likely that as the impacts of climate change progress, each tick season will be worse than the last. As winters get milder and shorter, ticks are more likely to survive and reproduce, and a female tick can produce roughly 3,000 eggs. Dr. Lloyd says this means the tick population can explode quite quickly. All right, turning to Saskatchewan now, where the Agricultural Producers Association says the federal and provincial agriculture ministers should consider extending the June 20th crop insurance seeding deadline. APAS President Ian Boxall says too much spring moisture has delayed seeding over most of the province, and even a 1-week extension would help some farmers. The Saskatchewan Crop Insurance Corporation says seeding deadlines for corn, chickpea, and hemp have passed, and the deadline for soybeans is June 2nd. The corporation says June 20th remains the seeding deadline for all other crops. Ontario is showcasing its pride. Pride flags have been raised at city halls across the province this morning. This is part of a month-long celebration of LGBTQ culture. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau attended the flag raising in Ottawa this morning. Mayor John Tory oversaw the raising of the rainbow flag in downtown Toronto, and Bonnie Crombie, the mayor of Mississauga, also had a ceremony at her city hall today. A major American charity wants to help fund the Indigenous Guardians program in the Northwest Territories. There are 80 Guardian programs running across Canada, and they depend on local Indigenous people to manage protected areas on their traditional lands, monitor animals and plants, test water quality, and help create land use and marine use plans. The Pew Charitable Trusts is in talks with the federal and territorial governments to make funding for the program permanent. Stay with us after the break. We take a deeper look at monkeypox in Forum Daily's weekly medical segment with Dr. Abhishek Raut. Stay with us. Toronto Public Health has confirmed a second case of monkeypox and is investigating 6 other cases. Monkeypox is a rare disease that comes from the same family of viruses that causes smallpox, but officials say it doesn't spread easily between people. Earlier this week, the World Health Organization's top monkeypox expert said she was skeptical that the virus would spark a global pandemic. Well, joining us now to give us the latest information on monkeypox in our weekly medical segment is Dr. Abhishek Raut, Medical Director at Appletree Medical Group. Dr. Raut, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Pleasure to be here.
So how serious of an infection is monkeypox? How does it affect the body both externally and internally?
Well, monkeypox was first discovered in 1958 when we had 2 outbreaks of a pox-like disease in a colony of monkeys kept for research, hence the name monkeypox. The first human case of monkeypox was really around 1970. So it really has been endemic for quite some time. The illness really begins with fever, headaches, muscle aches. You start getting back pains, swollen lymph nodes, chills, and exhaustion. And then about 3 days after all of this, you start developing a rash, often beginning on the face and moving to the different parts of the body. These rashes or lesions tend to become vesicles or pustules, and then eventually scabs, and then fall off there. Typically, it lasts about 2 to 4 weeks, and monkeypox has been shown to cause death in as many as 1 in 10 people who contract the disease.
Sounds like something no one wants, Dr. Raut. Now, it's also said that this condition has a longer incubation period. So how long does it take for symptoms to occur?
That's a good question. So the incubation period, which is the time from infection to symptoms for monkeypox, is actually quite long. We see that it is typically 7 to 14 days, but can range from 5 to 21 days. So almost 3 weeks there.
So how can people prevent spreading the disease if symptoms don't occur for up to 3 weeks?
Right, that is a challenge. Luckily, we've learned a few things from the COVID pandemic here. Most important lesson is to really focus on general prevention strategies, avoiding contact with potentially contaminated surfaces, reducing prolonged face-to-face contact with possibly infected individuals, and of course, good hand hygiene, washing your hands regularly.
All right, Dr. Raut, what do we know about reinfection after getting monkeypox? Is it like chickenpox that you cannot catch it again?
That's a good question. So though uncommon, you can theoretically get chickenpox more than once. The majority of people have had chickenpox, will be immune from it for the remainder of their lives, but there are a few cases there. Having said that, we're going to see something very similar to monkeypox and smallpox. Smallpox also had an infection where survivors had lifelong protection. So barring any significant genetic drift, I think we'll see it very similar with monkeypox, chickenpox, and smallpox, where there's a lifelong protection there.
All right, Dr. Raut, now I want to jump to some research I came across today. It indicated that older people who received smallpox vaccinations may have some sort of immunity to monkeypox. So can you tell us a little bit more about this?
That's right. So monkeypox comes from the same family as smallpox. And so what we're seeing is smallpox vaccines have been shown to be very effective in preventing monkeypox as well as treating it after exposure. Now, the world eradicated smallpox in 1980. Many countries do keep small stocks of the vaccine in case of emergencies. We know that this vaccine can be up to 85% effective in stopping a monkeypox infection. Canada stopped immunizing people against smallpox in 1972. And we don't know how much smallpox vaccine Canada has available, but what we do know is that Public Services and Procurement Canada has already put out a tender last month to purchase about 500,000 doses of a smallpox vaccine.
All right, and on that note, in terms of the government response, what do you think would be the best steps that officials can take in order to prevent this disease from becoming endemic?
Right. So I think we have to look at the lessons we've learned in previous epidemics and pandemics. Some of us might remember that it was 2003, 2004, where the United States saw 47 cases of monkeypox. During that time, there was really only animal to human transmission from prairie dogs sold as pets, and there were no deaths. But from that pandemic, we learned valuable lessons that we should use today. Number one was contact tracing all potential cases. Second was accurate lab testing of all potential contacts. And third was vaccination and treatment guidelines for at-risk populations right away.
All right, Dr. Raut, always great having you on Forum Daily. Thank you again for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Stay with us. Coming up after the break, we'll be shifting our focus to Ontario as Election Day looms for the current provincial election. We'll be speaking with Dr. Lydia Miljan, political science professor at the University of Windsor, to examine how Ontario voters have been responding to this election, as well as discuss each party's campaign platforms and whether they have addressed the concerns of Ontarians. And of course, after that, we'll have more news from around the world when we return. So stay tuned. We'll be right back here on Forum Daily. The head of a leading polling company says Ontario voters don't seem particularly excited about their choices with the provincial election only one day away. Polls suggest that the Progressive Conservatives are poised to win a second majority government and that neither the NDP nor the Liberals have pulled away enough to become the clear second-place challenger. Sachi Curl, the president of the Angus Reid Institute, says recent polling by her firm found that PC leader Doug Ford is the top choice for premier, but with only 35% support. This while NDP leader Andrea Horwath is statistically tied around 20% with not sure. Ms. Curl mentioned that half of voters in Ontario are casting ballots to keep a party they don't like out of power rather than for a party they want to see win. Well, with us now to discuss the Ontario provincial election is Dr. Lydia Miljan, political science professor at the University of Windsor. Doctor, welcome back to Forum Daily.
My pleasure. Nice to be here.
So some very underwhelming polls here. How are you reacting to these polls?
Well, nothing has changed during this campaign or even before. For the last, I'd say during the entire pandemic, it looked like the Progressive Conservatives led under Doug Ford had the support of Ontarians. And, usually we expect something to change during election campaign, some event, but nothing's happened. This is sort of a nothing campaign and nothing's changed.
And it seems that the public is also reacting in that way. It seems that they're not very impressed. So what do we know so far about the public response to this election so far?
I just don't think there's a lot of response. I mean, people are still saying that they're following it, but I don't think it's changed anybody's minds. And I think in part it's because, I don't think that the Progressive Conservatives under Doug Ford really had a chance to activate their mandate. And typically, Canadians don't usually vote out a government after majority, at least after one term. I think they allowed them to have a second term. And really, you could say that Doug Ford really didn't get a chance to do his agenda simply because of the pandemic. The other thing is that he kind of pivoted during the pandemic to be much more kindler and gentler kind of progressive conservative leader. And that's made it very difficult for the opposition parties to really land any strong attacks against him.
And what about your perspective? What has been your overall impression of this race so far?
Kind of boring. I mean, I thought there'd be a lot more sparks during the campaign. I thought that the debate would have been a defining event, and it really didn't. I don't think it really changed anybody's points of view. It's an interesting election, much like the last one was interesting because it was sort of a change election. People were tired of 14 years of the Liberal government. And Doug Ford at that time ran a very controversial decision in that he didn't do media. He didn't do any mainstream media interviews, and he's done that again this time. He got away with it in 2018, I think, because it was a change election. But it's interesting that it's actually hasn't harmed him this time around. So by not answering questions of reporters, he's able to stay away from making any mistakes on the campaign trail, which is really what you want to do when you're the front runner.
Definitely. So can you give us a brief overview of each of the parties' campaign platforms and promises so far?
Well, there's a lot of promises. I mean, the Liberals have a 19-point pledge to deal with everything from, lowering people's price at paying for transit to canceling highway projects. The NDP is really focused on affordability as well, but also in terms of increasing the minimum wage. And for the Progressive Conservatives, essentially they haven't really released a platform. What they're running on is their last budget, which was an enormous budget, more funding for healthcare, more funding for education, and a number of different initiatives.
So I guess the bigger question here would be whether the concerns of Ontarians are being addressed in these platforms. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think what Ontarians have the same concerns as anyone else in the country in terms of affordability and sort of just the response to the COVID-19 pandemic and getting over that. Certainly healthcare is something that the province can do something about, but affordability is a much more difficult one. The province has nothing to do with interest rates. It has nothing to do with rising gas prices. And so I think that the top of mind issues for people really aren't issues that can be addressed by the government. And that's perhaps why there hasn't been as much enthusiasm or interest in this campaign.
All right, Dr. Lydia Miljan, thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.
My pleasure. Nice speaking with you.
All right, up next, we've got more news from around the world, of course. Germany vows to supply Ukraine with more modern radar systems and anti-aircraft missiles. Russia cuts off the gas supply for Denmark's largest energy company. 2 deadly earthquakes strike China's Sichuan province, and U.S. President Joe Biden meets with baby formula CEOs to discuss the ongoing shortage. We'll have these stories and more news from around the world coming up after the break, so stay tuned. We'll be back here shortly on Forum Daily News. Stay with us. Germany will supply Ukraine with modern anti-aircraft missiles and radar systems. They're stepping up arms deliveries amid criticism that Germany isn't doing enough to help Kyiv fend off Russia. Chancellor Olaf Scholz told lawmakers that his government has decided to provide Ukraine with Iris-T missiles developed by Germany together with other NATO nations. The announcement comes as Ukrainian forces are engaged in a grinding battle for the eastern industrial region of the Donbass. Meanwhile, Denmark's largest energy company says Russia cut off its gas supply. The move was an act of retaliation triggered by Denmark's refusal to pay in rubles. Russia previously halted natural gas supplies to Finland, Poland, Bulgaria, and the Netherlands for the same reason. Danish officials say the company is still expected to be able to serve its customers. Still, Russia's move means that Denmark must purchase more gas from the European gas market. Well, the war's impact can be felt all the way in South Africa. This is where people are feeling the bite of fuel price increases that are blamed on Russia's war in Ukraine and the rise in Brent crude oil prices. Neighboring Zimbabwe and other African countries are also grappling with increasing fuel prices. South Africa, the continent's most developed economy, saw gas prices go above 24 rand per liter. This is the equivalent to just under $2 a liter. Diesel prices also went up. The latest increases make fuel in South Africa about 40% more expensive than a year ago. To try to hold down the spike in price, the government has reduced its tax on fuel sales. Well, with the world's focus on the war in Ukraine, it is shifting attention away from efforts to tackle climate change, at least according to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Ahead of an environmental conference in Stockholm, Mr. Guterres says at the same time, the conflict is showcasing what he called the world's suicidal dependence on fossil fuels. He pointed to the European Union's decision to stop most imports of Russian oil, despite their dependence on Russian oil and gas. All right, turning to China now, where more than 1,400 rescue personnel are heading to the southwestern Sichuan province. This is where 2 earthquakes have damaged houses and killed at least 4 people. A magnitude 6.1 quake struck first and was followed by a 4.5 magnitude earthquake 3 minutes later. Rail service has been partially suspended. China's deadliest earthquake in recent years was a 7.9 magnitude quake in 2008 that killed nearly 90,000 people in the Sichuan province. In Turkey, the president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, says his country will no longer hold high-level talks with neighboring Greece. Ankara resumed negotiations with Athens last year. This was following a 5-year break to address differences over a range of issues. The renewed talks had made little headway, but last week, Mr. Erdogan signaled his displeasure at comments made by the Greek Prime Minister during a trip to the U.S. Mr. Erdogan said Mr. Mitsotakis no longer exists for him, accusing the Greek leader for trying to block Turkey's acquisition of F-16 fighter planes. Moving to the U.S. now, where President Joe Biden is hosting a roundtable discussion today with the CEOs of companies that make baby formula. The group won't include the head of Abbott Nutrition. That's the company whose Michigan plant was shut down in February over safety concerns, sparking the shortage. Mr. Biden is trying to ease nationwide shortages by importing foreign supplies and using the Defense Production Act to speed up domestic production. A jury has awarded actor Johnny Depp $15 million in damages in his libel lawsuit against ex-wife Amber Heard. The same jury awarded Ms. Heard $2 million in damages in her countersuit against Mr. Depp. He sued Ms. Heard for $50 million, accusing her of libeling him with a 2018 op-ed that she wrote about being abused. She then filed a $100 million counterclaim against the Pirates of the Caribbean star. A 1-kilogram platinum coin encrusted with hundreds of diamonds fetched more than $1.2 million at auction. The Heffel Fine Art Auction House says an anonymous buyer took the Royal Canadian Mint's The Ultimate piece after heated bidding on Tuesday. Heffel says the prize, which includes auction house fees, exceeded the pre-sale estimate of between $700,000 and $900,000. This sets a new record for a coin offered at auction in Canada. The Ultimate has a face value of $2,500 and is made of 99.95% pure platinum with a rose gold plated rim. The piece is engraved with a cherry blossom design made by Canadian artist Derek Wicks. All right, that'll do it for your look at national and international news. Take care, Canada. We'll see you next time.